Hey, this is David with EV World News. We talk about electric vehicles, green energy, and the stock markets. Today, I have our founder, Bill Moore, with us in the studio. How you doing, Bill?
Yeah, guten Tag.
Guten Tag. All right, let's start out because this is a really funny story. It is sometimes funny to see some, news that's you know, not just serious or promotional or whatever. This is kind of funny. This comes from Electric. No, e-bike fires are not a leading cause of death in New York City. This is
Yeah,
funny. So, e-bike,
in a tragic kind of way, actually. But
yeah, fear mongering from irresponsible journalists painting an overblown risk of e-bike fires.
yep,
This is from Men's Journal. E-bike batteries are a leading cause of death in New York City, but it's completely wrong. It's not even
yeah,
close to
not even
reality.
close.
Yeah. So that isn't to say that you can't have improperly constructed or tampered with e-bike lithium batteries as an issue.
Or
And
chargers.
or chargers.
Yeah,
And New York City is starting to regulate batteries in New York cities. Now, bike couriers rely on e-bikes to deliver food and goods to city residents and are often forced to buy the cheapest e-bikes available due to the low wages of these critical service
yep.
jobs. Such cheap e-bikes regularly scrimp on important safety features, resulting in higher risk of battery fires. Remember we had that one article, was it Atlanta, that's trying to subsidize e-bikes for
Hmm.
low-income people?
Yeah,
Kind of interesting thing, but this is fatal. New York City saw 17 deaths last year from fires started by faulty lithium-ion batteries. Now that is pretty notable. It's
yeah.
worth noting that many, if not most, aren't actually caused by e-bike batteries, but rather electric scooters and e-motorbikes that firefighters don't understand and lump this into the e-bike category. This is quite interesting. Every
Yeah, if
one of
you
those deaths is
look
a
at most of
tragedy.
the, yeah, you look at the photographs of the bikes that have been piled up outside of the burned structures. Almost all of those are what I call kick scooters. Where you kind of stand up on the thing and got a handle, and you scoot down the street. Not technically, an e-bike, an electric bike.
So, compared to battery fire deaths, New Yorkers are 176 times more likely to die from a drug overdose,
Yeah,
23 times more likely to be murdered, 5 times more likely to die while riding the subway. Now, if they're 23 times more likely to be murdered, that means they're 100 times more likely to die from tripping and falling, because that's about the difference in the United States in the rate of murders versus tripping and falling deaths. And that means they're also probably 400 times more likely to die from medical malpractice.
right.
So some of this, oh, they're 3 times more likely to die from choking. It'd be safer to chew your food longer than to worry about an e-bike fire. But it's just kind of silly.
Yeah,
A single space heater fire in 2022 killed 3 times as many people as all bike battery fires in New York
yeah,
City. It is funny though, when you think about 17 deaths, it's tragic, right? But in the
yeah,
immortal words of Joseph Stalin, the death of one man is a tragedy. The death of millions is merely a statistic. And
yeah.
when you're looking at a city the size of New York City, 17 people is a rounding error.
Yeah,
Okay.
I mean, a borough in New York is a couple million people,
Yeah, it's just
and
hard to
total population
comprehend.
is what, 8 million, something like that.
It's huge. It's huge, and I'm not trying to say that it shouldn't be zero, but any number greater than zero is bad. But sometimes it's just, you know, I'm sure that people still die from pianos falling. You know,
Well, how many people still have? Well, I guess there are some people still have pianos, but
oh yeah, yeah. Anyways, we want to talk about the German minister.
yeah, Jennifer Morgan. Of course, Morgan being the word for morning in German, but and listening to her, she did an interview in Davos just recently here a day or so ago, and she is talking about how the German economy is transferring and the European economy is transferring out of fossil fuels, and that was precipitated, of course, by the Russian invasion of Ukraine. and basically cutting off, Germany's supply and much of the rest of Europe's supply of natural gas. But the interesting comment she made is that those fossil fuels investments and assets are shortly going to become stranded assets, which is the first time I've heard anyone in an official government position basically say that the fossil fuels and all that money that they've been given and that they've invested is eventually going to become an asset that's worthless because we've got other better, cleaner alternatives.
Well, and that seems to be the progress we're making. Let's
Not fast, not now. That pointed out that's not fast enough because we should be tripling our solar. We should be doubling our wind energy and those kinds of resources. So the consensus is we're not doing it fast enough, but we are doing it. And the more we do it, the less the fossil fuels have to play.
Well, then I want to segue that into my discussion about the protectionism for American solar. So Clean Technica put out an article talking about protecting and empowering American solar. And this is something because I come from the construction industry. And the Solar Energy Industries Association is empowering customers by not only providing them with informational resources, but also working to develop national standards that promote fair sales practices to ensure the safe and uniform installation of solar and storage systems. You've heard me say this before. The sale of solar in the United States is somewhat scammy. Their profit margin is almost 300% of this of what their cost is. So a $40,000 solar installation typically has a cost of about $10,000, including labor and materials. And that's really unheard of outside of the medical industry to see those kind of margins. But what
Yeah.
happens is the solar installer goes out of business at the end of every year and reopens under a new name. And so then they're not providing their 15 or 20-year warranties.
Right, right, right. Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
So this is part of the scam in the
The
solar
scam.
industry because you're supposed to have a 15-plus year warranty on these things. And that's what's really happening is that when you do have warranty issues, that company's nowhere to be found
No
anymore.
longer to be
Okay.
found. Yeah.
And so these national standards, and this is my experience, you and I were talking about this a little bit earlier, is in the construction industry, the more licensing requirements there are, in theory, are protecting consumers, but in reality, it's keeping new competitors from entering the marketplace. So what it does is it drives up costs. So you see this in a lot of different things. I'm not saying like an electrician doesn't need to be highly skilled. I mean, because it used to be electrical workers had a super high rate of death. Okay, that was one of the most 100 years ago. It was one of the most dangerous professions. It was something like 10% of electricians died annually. It was some
Yeah.
crazy excessive number for people, especially working on electrifying the United States in the first place. It was crazy. It was almost suicide to have that kind of job.
Well, it was all
Okay,
brand new technology. That's
right.
like the same problem with mechanics today, trying to work on electric cars. That's a
Yep.
new technology. So,
Yep. But they're wanting to put in these new accreditations. I'm not saying they shouldn't exist. I think a solar installer should be
yeah, should be
certified in
qualified.
some way. There should be some kind of
Yeah.
training for it. But in reality, this is going to lead to keeping those prices of solar propped up when they really need most solar installations should be half of what people are getting quoted, in my
Hmm.
opinion. I really just think it's out of touch and it
Now,
can't
let me
go on
invite
forever.
any listeners or people in installer
This is my
business.
opinion. This is my opinion.
Right, right. Let's jump in here and comment down below on the video and get some feedback on that. So,
Yes, and I'm welcome if somebody can give me reasoning why. And I'm an advocate for solar. I have solar.
yep.
I mean, I think it's a great thing, but I do think
You'd
that
like to not be ripped off in the process. So, yeah.
right. I think that you'd have wider adoption if it really was more financially viable. And like where we live now, we're not in the greatest solar zone, and we use
It's
gas
not
heat in the
bad
winter.
though.
No, it's not. It's not. But I'm just saying, you could still have great adoption here. We have a lot of sunshine here.
Yeah.
So, we have the benefit of that.
The problem is when we get snow, it kind of curls over the roof and then piles up on the lee side of that roof, which is where my solar panels would be if I'd put them in. So I'm
Yeah.
not climbing up on my roof to clean those panels off.
Well, the good thing is we have high winds to help keep the snow off them.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so going back to Germany, this next article is actually also German. It's talking about BMW. So
Oh,
BMW
yeah.
says peak combustion engine has passed as EV car sales now drive its growth. The tipping point for combustion engines was last year. And
Yeah.
I get all these people all the time. It's like, oh, EVs are dying and all this, and they hear all
Yeah. It's
this
just a
news and all
fad.
that. Yeah, it's just a fad.
Uh-uh.
But all the manufacturers are switching over. I, you know, I speak a lot to some folks in the United Kingdom. They're like, look, starting in 2030, every car sold that's new in the United Kingdom has to be either a plug-in hybrid or a full EV. And by 2035, they have to be all EV.
Yeah.
Now,
Much like
um,
here. That's the part of the Biden proposal. And
I don't,
then we should talk about HR 4468.
oh, I don't even know what that is.
House Resolution 4468 was a creation of the the conservative Republican House majority to basically deny the EPA any possibility of defining what car emissions should be. So
Oh,
effectively saying, and I think they call it, ironically, it's called the CARS Act. It's something about, basically, we shouldn't have government dictating what kind of cars you can drive. If you want a gas car, you can have a gas car. And so basically, trying to put a stop to the Biden administration's attempt to gradually, over the next 12 years, 11 years, wean us off of our dependence on gasoline cars.
I mean, you think about it. If everybody had a plug-in hybrid, it would collapse the oil industry, because people would only then
Hmm.
really be using gas for driving long distance.
Yeah.
I mean, people would stop using gas for their daily commute.
Yeah. In fact, there's a TV, I think it was a BMW or somebody running a TV ad to that effect that you can drive around the city on electric. And then when you need to make that long distance trip, you've got the gasoline to do that. So, yeah,
Yep.
the car companies starting to run those commercials. At least I'm seeing them here locally.
Let's see. BMW said their EV sales jumped 75% last year.
Yeah.
That's a huge for a legacy car maker. That's really quite fascinating. 'Cause I remember a while back they had announced news that in Germany they were only going to make EVs. And so they were still going to make gas-powered cars in other countries, but not in Germany anymore.
Yeah, yeah, they're going to that same plant that they're converting over to build electrics is also going to be tailored to handle. I'm guessing it says hydrogen cars, but I'm guessing what they mean is, fuel cell cars running off of, compressed hydrogen.
All right. So, Bill, next, you were going to tell me about the Chicago disaster. So, what's going on in
Okay,
Chicago?
so apparently, people that own Teslas in the greater Chicago area have been having trouble getting their cars charged at their local supercharger stations. And so the local media has picked up on this and called it a graveyard of electric cars because there's
Again,
so many cars parked there that can't get charged. And of course, the question is, why is that? Is that a problem for all electric cars? Is that a problem just for Tesla supercharger stations? And how is that impacting supercharger stations in Buffalo and Toronto and Edmonton and places even further north and even colder? So is it a function of the sub-zero? What are we? Where are we at? Oh my God, we're at 2
we're 4.
degrees.
Oh, I'm at 4 over where I'm at.
You're at 4 over here. I'm at 2 degrees. Wow, we've got finally. gotten
Yeah,
above
we're
zero.
talking Fahrenheit. We're not talking Celsius here.
Well,
That'd be a lot warmer if it was
yeah.
close.
So, interesting thing is once the temperature gets to what we call zero, which is what minus. Anyway, at that point, anything below that Celsius and Fahrenheit are the same number.
No,
It's, I
no,
don't I don't quite understand that. But
because we're
anyway,
about we're about minus 20 Celsius right now. Yeah,
oh, okay. So anyway, you can tell I haven't lived in Europe all that long.
yeah.
But anyway, so the question is what's the problem? And there's a Reddit thread that I linked to where all of the the local drivers and people out of state are asking, well, what's the problem? Is it just Tesla? Is it impacting the charge point and the Volkswagen Electrify America stations? So we don't know at this point, but boy, the local media jumped on that thing that, boy, you can't get your car started. Now, let me ask how many people have ever gotten in their gasoline powered car that's been sitting for a few days in very cold winter weather and had that thing go, and that start?
Man, I used to live in
I've
North
had it
Dakota.
happen to me many times.
I used to live in North Dakota where it was cold all the time, but I had my car had the block heater. And, it was really interesting because my first year of college, I went to a college in Houston and I drove that car to Houston and it was so hot, the car didn't want to start in the heat.
Yeah.
And I'd constantly
Yeah.
have people coming up to me telling me I had something unplugged because I had that little plug
Oh,
hanging
yeah.
there on the front by the
Well,
bumper.
what they do in Canada is the parking meters up there actually have plugs, so you can plug in your your transmission heater,
Mhm.
to keep the transmission fluid warm. So yeah, so it's once it gets this cold, um, any type of machinery is going to have problems. I worked for 9 years at the local airline here down at the airport, and I cannot imagine right now having to get out and service aircraft, either fueling or loading and unloading baggage and all the other stuff. Emptying the toilets and all that good stuff. I can't imagine having to do that in this kind of weather, and neither can the airlines, which accounts for why there have been so many flight cancellations and delays. It's just
Oh yeah.
too cold. So,
Yeah, oh yeah. We're in one of the coldest 2 week streaks I've ever faced in Nebraska.
oh yeah.
Yeah. So what's interesting, you had that issue in Chicago, and did they ever decide what caused it? Was
No,
there ever
that's
an
what I'm
explanation?
saying is that this is still an ongoing situation.
Still ongoing?
People
Well,
are wondering, is this a Tesla problem? I saw one speculation that it's possibly something with the communication equipment, but I can't imagine that happening. So I don't know. I would assume Tesla would have taken those chargers and set them up like they do with cars and take them to Alaska or wherever and charge them to make sure they worked in very very cold weather. But
well, I've
something
gotten
happened. It'd be
in the
interesting to
last
go ahead.
in the last week, I keep getting notices from our electric company
Yeah,
use less electric, and the
use
gas company to use less gas
yep.
because they're being taxed on it pretty nice, or in a big way, and they want us to cut back on it. So I
Yep.
thought that was
Reduce
kind of
reduce your. I
interesting.
got that call too. Reduce your thermostat.
Yeah,
Don't use only a minimum amount of electricity between the hours of 7 and 9 in the morning and 4 and 7 in the afternoon or evening, something like that. Yeah.
shut down your Bitcoin mining operation.
Yeah. I don't have one of those, so
Yeah, but see, if you have a Bitcoin mining operation, it keeps the house warm too. Yeah,
well, that's a yeah, I
yeah.
suppose. But
Yeah,
interesting,
I don't do that. I don't do that. But one of
yeah,
my neighbors
I
was.
saw a story that a lot of the Bitmine miners are selling their equipment now.
That's because it's having again. It's having
Yeah,
again next week.
right. Yeah.
Well, that was interesting. We're talking about Chicago in this issue, which isn't nearly as cold as Saskatchewan. So our next article
Right.
from um, Saskatchewan, and this is, if you don't know, this is in Canada, and which is north of the United States, for those of you who aren't good at geography. And with the federal government, this is a Canadian article, okay? So we're talking about the Canadian federal government planning to phase out sales of new gas-powered vehicles during the next decade. Many drivers question how they will fare on cold prairie days like this week's. So, two electric car enthusiasts from Saskatoon um, giving their opinion, and there's no starting of the car. It's just kind of on, like a phone, basically, or a computer on wheels. The major downside is the loss of driving range. And let me see. This guy's Tesla Model 3 generally can travel 500 kilometers on a single charge in the summer, but on cold winter days, that decreases to around 300 kilometers. That's huge. But of course, he's running the heater. He's running the heater that whole time.
Right.
With the charging infrastructure that has come online in the last few years in the province, but still enough to feel confident leaving town. Let's see. He says
Yeah.
electric vehicle will be a much better driving experience in the winter than a gas car. I believe electric is the best for these temperature because it's a simpler car. It's taking care of itself even if I'm not thinking about it. I can leave my car unplugged overnight to minus 40, that's Celsius, which is still really freaking cold. I'd guess that's probably about minus 20 Fahrenheit, probably. Fire up the app on my phone, preheat the car, heated steering wheel, heated seats, hop in the car, everything is defrosted, toasty warm, and away I go. Um, one of the big things is the car heats up much faster. And so that's a big.
Hmm.
Now, I don't know if this article talks about it, but one of the big things too is electric vehicles drive better in snow. And because there's no delay from the gas pedal, I know I'm still calling it the gas pedal, to wheels. But anyways, um, now, said that their battery electric vehicles won't work for all drivers, particularly anyone who has to travel long distance regularly in areas of the province with very little charging infrastructure like northern Saskatchewan. Yeah, but people shouldn't live there.
Yeah. By the way, the temperature in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan right now is let's see. This is a little confusing because I'm looking it up. It says minus 14 Fahrenheit, and in centigrade, that's minus 25,
Okay.
or in Celsius, yeah, centigrade.
Yeah. So it's
Oh,
18 degrees Fahrenheit colder than here right
yes,
now. Yeah.
yeah,
Fuel savings vary, but charging from 0 to 100 costs about $10 when charged at home, an electricity rated 14 cents per kilowatt. That's not bad for that part of the country. Um, it's interesting when you get to the coastal areas of the continent, the charge for electricity is much higher than it is in the center of the
yeah.
United
Well,
States.
yeah, more people, more infrastructure.
I saw not long ago that Nebraska ranked as cheapest in the country for electricity,
Yeah,
for
well, we're
consumers.
about just under 12 cents, I think, a kilowatt hour.
Yeah, we're really cheap.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then the very last article I had this is from a few days ago actually, but government support for electric vehicles is good for everyone. We've talked about this a little bit in terms of everything from pushing the government putting in roads to make cars more effective. There's lots of things the government has
Right.
done,
100
but
years ago, yeah.
yeah, and companies are offering more electric vehicles. There's more things to we see some stuff in here like the France and their social leasing where they're making it so somebody can get a really small Renault for like 50 euros a
Yeah.
month on a lease. There's some cool things out there that are ideas for electrifying areas you wouldn't think of. And it's just like subsidizing e-bikes. I'm not sure if that's something we're ever going to see a huge change in, but transportation in the US is about 30% of emissions, 60% of that coming from light duty vehicles, including cars. And let's see, switching to electric drops a driver's emissions by 30% to 60% if you continue to drive the same amount. Now, this is kind of interesting. Because of the emissions savings, government policy that accelerates a transition can be particularly impactful for countering climate change. And although electric vehicles are becoming more affordable and chargers more available, government policy is needed to nudge private markets towards investments to make this accessible. I was looking at something else about charging. In the United States, outside of Tesla, there's about 5 main companies that do chargers. In Europe, it's like 500. And there's like the top 5 companies in Europe that make charging stations
Mhm.
have installed at least as many as Tesla. Whereas the United States, um, Tesla has installed like 3 times as many chargers as all the other companies combined or something like that. It's a big disparity between how
Yeah.
many chargers are out there and everybody else in the United States. But, the first area where policy is needed to help is with the higher upfront cost of EVs. But that's changing. We see this with manufacturing and things like that. EVs are actually on a path to be cheaper to produce. And
Yeah, some of them are you can get for what you'd pay for maybe a well-equipped gasoline car, but you can get a nice EV now for that or less. So they're becoming parity with the internal combustion engine.
all right. Well, anyways, um, that was pretty much all I had to cover today, Bill.
Oh, there's so many other things we can talk about, but that's probably enough. We've enough for one day. So
Yep. So,
I've, I've,
folks,
I've, I've got to get my editor's 5 choices posted, which are some
okay,
are what we talked about, and some of them we haven't yet talked about. So we'll maybe save that for Thursday then.
okay. Um, Anyways, folks, make sure to like the video so it gets shown to more people, and
Please,
please comment
please.
and let us know what you'd like to see or maybe what you didn't like to see. So,